Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby. And today I am very, very pleased to bring you now officially the most interviewed person in the history of Fintech Focus TV. It's Phil over at Taskize. Phil, how are you?
I'm great, Toby. I'm great. I'm not sure that's an accolade that I actually want, is it?
It's very much like, you know, one of the stars of the Jonathan Ross show, who keeps coming back every year with bigger and better things to come back into it. So okay. That's the way. Yeah. That's the way I'm picturing it anyway. And it's for a reason as well, because this is now the fourth time that you've appeared, and again, one of the very, very few companies that has been there every single year in the Financial Technologist magazine's listing of the most influential fintechs year on year on year on year. And I think that's testament to what you and the team have been doing, where we saw a very, very early stage business sort of continue to gather pace. Last time, and we said this before as well, you were our last, we were each other's last face-to-face meeting before the pandemic hit, when we filmed this in the studio, the last studio-based interview of Fintech Focus TV as well.
I remember that.
And I think you were probably one of the first people I did the elbow bump with in a meeting, or the foot tap, I think we were doing at that sort of stage as well.
Maybe elbow bump, yeah.
Just before we knew what was coming our way. So loads and loads to pass, and we'll get into all of that in a minute, because I really want to hear about it, and I'll recap as to where you were, which was Taskize was winning loads and loads of new logos. There was some great press that you were talking about with new things that you were doing and how you were running with the business. We'll get back into that and then see how that sort of developed, because, as I say, it was before a huge curveball was thrown at us. Before we do that and get into all that good stuff, for anyone who hasn't seen any of our 3 prior episodes, which can only be a few people now because they were excellent conversations, tell us a little bit about Taskize and your background, if you would.
Okay, so just to warm everybody up, I suppose, what is Taskize? Taskize is an intercompany workflow platform. We are specifically focused in financial services operations. Our aim is to give management in operations clearer oversight, greater control, and to be able to drive down the efficiency of all of their staff when they're dealing with exceptions and breaks and any manual unstructured work between themselves and their counterparties, and fundamentally to replace the use of email, phone and chat when trying to make workflow. That's what Taskize does. When we spoke last year, I mentioned that our network was, I think, 220 firms. So that's including buy sides, that's sell sides, custodians, outsourcers, CSD. So it's, you know, top to bottom in terms of the flow of transactions. Now we're on 312. Wow. So there's been a really big increase in the network. There's still a huge pipeline of people coming through. But what's most interesting is the names that are coming through. So Taskize now has, I think, 13 of the top 20 tier 1 investment banks on the platform. Last year we brought on one of the largest asset management firms in the world, and we've been working with them closely to deploy the platform, which has been fantastic. We've increased the number of partnerships that we have and the integrations with those partnerships. We recently announced the most recent one of those is with Finborn. I know that you did a session with Tom from Finborn recently, so we're really looking forward to where that's going to take us. And then much greater deployment inside of the organizations who have been using Taskize. So it's been a good year. Despite
everything that's gone on. And I think that's something.
Yeah, exactly. I think despite and because of as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an important aspect, isn't it? Look, one of the things that we've been really hot on over the course of the last year is to try and show positives from a negative situation. There's been so much negative press that actually I think it's been important to showcase. And I think people have been sometimes, you know, almost embarrassed on the show to be able to say that this has been something which they've been able to turn into a positive, because it is an awkward thing, right? No one wants to sit there and gloat about how a pandemic has helped them grow their business. Yeah. But by the same rationale, there are companies there who sort of shut up shop and shielded from everything. Yeah. And there's been companies there who've gone on the offense and said, how can we add real value? And if we look at those businesses that we put into this year's most influential fintechs,
yeah,
and I talk about this every single week when we're having these shows, is the golden thread And one of those sort of 7-8 things that I look at within this that makes the company special who've been able to do that is they look at things and say, right, how can we add real value to the problem and solve some of the issues that are coming through from this. And because they're doing that, and because they're looking at that, it's meant that they've become invaluable to their marketplace and really driven their businesses further forward. And in so doing, also those businesses are their customers. And I think what's really interesting for me to hear about what you've just said is that sort of, you know, near 50% growth in customers on its own is spectacular in any sort of stage. But to do that when there's been so much volatility and uncertainty, which in some ways, obviously in financial services is a good thing, isn't necessarily a given. And the businesses there that have been able to articulate that and go with sales strategies and marketing strategies and stories to help their customers do that. And as you say, you know, take 13 of the top 20 investment banks in the world, large asset managers. These are people there who need to be told and need to be absolutely clear about the validity of a product to be able to embed and to invest in over that sort of period. And I think those companies that have been able to articulate that have really flown. So I really want to make sure that what we're doing here is to look at that and say, Phil, give us some of the highlights of the year. Give us a recap on what's happened and the story from when you left my office as probably the last time before we locked everything up to where we sit today. So I know you were back in the office yesterday. I'm back in today, but it's still very step by step and we're coming from your home today. Tell us a little bit about that journey in the year and how you guys have done.
So it has been a very, very unusual year. There's been quite a lot of sadness in terms of people being affected by COVID. There's been a lot of distraction because people have been trying to work out how do they run their businesses. A lot of the clients who just sent everybody home, they instantaneously had to move their disaster recovery and business continuity plans. They had to tear them up and start again. People weren't expecting that everybody would be at home. They thought they'd all be in the DR sites. Suddenly they're all at home. And security became an issue. Access to certain hardware became an issue, so they couldn't send Swift messages in some cases. And Taskize has been really happy that we can help with those sorts of problems. We introduced well before the pandemic. We introduced two-factor authentication. So now you don't have to be on the VPN in order to get onto the platform, but there is still the same levels of security. And one of the things that's important to understand around bringing on a large tier one is they have incredibly exacting standards for information security and for bringing on new technologies. And now Taskize has just proved the fact that it satisfies that. We've got partnerships, obviously Euroclear is our investor, but they have very, very high security standards. The DTCC is a strategic partner of ours. They have extremely high security standards. All of the other tier one clients that we have, I'm not going to mention all the names, obviously, they have the same requirements, and we've proved that now. So that's now a given. And in fact, every year they come back and they check. So we do penetration testing every year, and 2 of our clients actually come on site and do penetration testing, right? And do penetration testing to make sure that we keep that level of security. But it is now a de facto standard. So you have to be able to do that as table stakes. The point about that, though, is at the other end of the scale. So when you drop down out of the tier ones and you go into the tier 2s and the tier 3s, it means that they can invest now in a platform that has been sort of rubber stamped by the big guys. And that's really important for their peace of mind and knowing that if it works for a large investment bank, it's going to work for me. And that process has actually accelerated. And we've worked hard to simplify the onboarding process. We've worked hard to make the legals extremely easy to consume. And actually, I think our record for onboarding somebody is they went to the website, they filled in the online enrollment form, it arrived, and they were live 4 days later.
Wow, that's incredible, isn't it?
And that has been a lot of hard work, but it proves the fact that people are really getting value out of the platform and can do it quickly.
So with regards to the sort of traditional issues of selling to the enterprise, predominantly been around really clunky and difficult procurement processes.
Yeah.
This has obviously thrown necessity into the mix over the course of the last year, where we've seen people finding that potentially easier. You're as a business, you've grown from a real startup into a business where I imagine that's getting easier and easier. And as you say, the sort of proof of concepts and the track record, the sort of power of the crowd has allowed that to happen a little bit closer. Tell me a little bit about how that procurement process has eased over time, and in fact, has it eased because of what we've been seeing in the pandemic over the last year or so?
So in the bigger firms, it hasn't. All right? No, you're not going to win any prizes cutting corners on information security. It still takes time. It still takes a long time, and you have to prove it annually. Really important. On the smaller tier ones, the bigger tier twos, yes, that has helped indeed. And I think one of the implications of COVID has been that banks who maybe a year and a half ago were thinking, is cloud the right thing to do? Is cloud the right way to go? They now have embraced it wholeheartedly. There's been a huge acceleration in cloud adoption. Even the call that we're having on Zoom now, you wouldn't have expected Zoom to be so commonplace inside of banks as it is. And that adoption to cloud has definitely helped because we're a cloud-based platform. Ironically, when we engineered the platform, we allowed organizations who might have had a concern around cloud to run it on-prem, so that you can take a version of Taskize. If you have major concerns about security or sort of geographic requirements around data sovereignty, or what's going to happen in terms of what the regulators require, you can run Taskize on-prem if you want, and it's hooked seamlessly into the cloud version. I will point out that nobody has taken that option. The cost model for on-prem versus cloud is prohibitive, so it would have to be very, very serious reasons for doing that. But when you've got the largest banks in the world running it all on cloud, that's a big testament to what people's perceptions of it is. But there's one part to that is important, is people get nervous about the fact that they have to send data everywhere. In order to run my operations, I've got to share data with everybody. The truth of it is that you only have to share the data that you need to share with the counterparty that is responsible for the other side of this particular problem that you're dealing with. You don't have to share all of your data. And that means that you should be selective in the way that you share your data. And you want to share it on a temporal basis. So for a particular transaction that is failing, you need to share some data. But that's it. Once you've resolved what the reason for the break is, that's the end of that process. And in operations, workflows aren't that complicated, and they are relatively quick. You're talking, hours and a few days. You're not talking weeks and months. So you want to make sure you don't just blanket share all your data. It's not necessary. Yeah,
it's an interesting aspect, that, isn't it, as well as to how trends evolve, and that cloud adoption has been. I think very early on, it was termed the sort of petrol on the bonfire of cloud adoption and digital transformation, digital adoption within the financial stage. And sometimes it needs those sort of seismic moments for something so obvious to be adopted across it, because it's and I think it's going to speed up by 5-10 years the sort of the technical ability of the financial services space. So there's been some positives around that as well. Around other areas of trends that we're seeing, the cloud has obviously been a massive trend of the last year and the adoption of it. We're also seeing other trends emerge, and I think you guys have embraced those sort of areas as well over the last year. One of those being collaboration, interoperability, the ability for and I guess the demand that's been generated, particularly from enterprise customers, where they're looking for something a little bit more bespoke and tailored than legacy systems have traditionally allowed them to be. And that's created huge opportunities and gains for both companies such as yours, but also the end users themselves to have something
very much
far more fit for type. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, attitudes definitely have changed. Right? I love the word co-opetition. I think that is a word that people are beginning to realise isn't a bad word, but it used to be called interoperability. It's now been called collaboration. But basically, it's a realization that financial services is a highly connected industry, and people need an application stack that is fit for purpose. And it's no good now trying to build one thing to do everything. And in most cases, building it yourself is also not the right thing to do. So what you want to do is you want to be able to pick and choose best of breed capabilities, safe in the knowledge that they're going to bolt together well.
Yeah.
They're going to play together well. And that requires not only integration at the technical level, that requires collaboration, let's use that word, collaboration at the workflow level. So you have to understand how work flows between different systems and back again, because ultimately is the work that you have to worry about. And then it has to work on, from a client's perspective, making sure that you're giving them a full end-to-end service. So some of the developments and some of the deals that we did last year with partners have been very interesting, because they've begun to realize more and more that providing their clients with a full end-to-end solution is actually will help their businesses as much as it will help their client. And we started, the first iteration that we did with this was we integrated with Euroclear's EasyWay. So if a client of Euroclear is on EasyWay, is looking at a settlement break, they can just press a button and it will automatically pass that break into a Taskize bubble, and they can then reach out to Euroclear, who will help them resolve what the issue is. The second one of that was with the DTCC. So they have a DXM platform, and I'm delighted now that we have closed the loop on that platform. So if you're a buy side looking at exceptions on DXM, again, you can lift the exception out into Taskize, and then you can invite your broker in to help resolve it. And we now have contributing brokers to DXM and buy sides who are logging into DXM, both on Taskize. So then when the bubble gets created, it gets passed seamlessly through. So that is a really good example of an end-to-end solution to work on the overall efficiency and control within settlements. And the feedback we're getting from the clients who are on this is really good.
That's brilliant to hear, isn't it? And I think that sort of ability to listen, going back to these my golden threads that I keep talking about, that sort of ability to, and again, this sounds incredibly obvious, as most of those sort of 7 do, but it's common sense and common practice, really the same said.
Yeah.
But you can look there and see that sort of ability to actually listen and understand, and take time to work with customers, to work with clients, to find out those needs and then provide the solutions to it, have been really common traits of businesses that have been able to really move themselves forward over this period. And I think another interesting thing about what you've been talking about is the sort of metamorphosis of your of thought of an attitude of your client base over that sort of period, about where Taskize has grown from our first episode that we spoke together, from where it was a sort of an inkling and exciting concept, through to where it's become now. And I think you termed it for almost an inevitability, easy for me to say, in terms of where it goes.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there as well.
So what we've seen is an evolution and a change in attitude with our clients. So at the beginning, it was like, we're going to take Taskize because there's going to be some settlement efficiency. Euroclear deployed it across all of their client services globally. So that really was a fantastic outcome for us. They're now putting it through all of their operations as well. And what this means is that people have taken Taskize, they've tried it, they found it successful, and they've been using it now for some time. And they're now changing the way that they ask us where we're going to take it. They're now working on how can we build our customized workflows that we have and that we want to share with our third parties, with our counterparties, with our clients, with our providers on Taskize. And we are really excited about what that means for this year. So the customization of workflows using Taskize's intercompany workflow platform, the bubbles, the Taskize Smart Directory, all of the workflow components that we have already, and see where the clients take it. So, as examples, we have a partner, a market data provider, and they're using Taskize for their client onboarding. So we weren't expecting that. So client onboarding, a lot of organizations talking to us about corporate action events. We're now extending our conversations around margin disputes, trying to resolve margin disputes. There's a big worry in the market that the uncleared margin rules regulation that has been around for the last 4 years, wave 5 is arriving in September, and that is going to bring on 800 or 900 new firms to do initial margining calculations. And the belief is that because it's new to them, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to have questions, it's going to create disputes. And if there isn't a platform to help resolve those disputes in a timely fashion, then it's going to bring inefficiency into the market as opposed to remove inefficiency. So we're talking to providers who look at managing margin, portfolio reconciliations, making margin payments, and saying, how can Taskize be connected up with you guys for dealing with UMR wave 5 and subsequently wave 6, which is next year.
So it's a very sort of client-driven strategy, isn't it? Of that sort of partnership you have with your customers, to listen to them, to understand, what they're looking for. And I sort of immediately, this sort of, when I talk about businesses like yours who've done that and done it really well, I sort of have this conflict of Henry Ford echoing in my ears, where he talks about if I'd listened to what my customers wanted, I'd have got the faster horses.
Faster horse, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see, that there's obviously, you have and started with a vision of what Taskize was there and can do. You've got a market view of how people can be using this and what they should be doing. And there's one size to say, look, this is what we do and how we can help you. This is what you should be doing as a business and how you should be using our product. And then there's this very interesting sort of consultative view that businesses like yours have taken, where it's like saying, right, tell us what you're looking for and we can then help fix it and make it for that.
Yeah. A really good example of that. Let's give a good example of that, right? So the largest custodian in the world uses Taskize to service their clients. Yeah. And so we call this outsourcing workflow is really important because it has to satisfy the needs of the client, the service capability of the outsourcer, and the needs of the client's clients. So there are lots of people involved in a single threaded workflow, and Taskize is being used to support that workflow end to end.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because that's a repeatable model. So an outsourcer will have any number of clients, and when it works for one, it becomes a repeatable model to work for the rest.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting opportunity for us. We're really excited to work with that client to extend that further.
So it kind of sort of mirrors that sort of opportunity to see what's working in other places and bring that sort of advisory piece to other people, but then also be tailored and bespoke to what their specific requirements are as well, which becomes a really good mix of what you're able to do.
Yeah, exactly. So you start with a fundamental idea that says, in order to bring efficiency to non-STP processes where humans have to get involved, you need to build a platform that will do that. That was the creation of the Taskize bubble, which contains all the intercompany workflow, and the Taskize Smart Directory, which looks at people based off the roles that they perform and the experience they have in performing those roles, rather than who they are as individuals. They have been proven to be successful. That is the basis and the foundation upon which these customizable workflows. I'll give you another example. Euroclear are going to be using Taskize to allow those member firms that aren't on SWIFT to report buying trades to them under CSDR. Now, I know that the regulation is still unclear, but at some point, when buy-ins are either mandated or optional, you will need to report them to your CSD. And Taskize is being used by Euroclear to provide the ability for clients to do buy and trade reporting. It's another example of a workflow that you wouldn't have naturally thought would fit to Taskize. But because of the foundations of what we have, organizations are coming to us and saying, well, can we use it for this? Can we use it for something else? One other large firm that has offices all around the world is not only using Taskize for the external inter-company workflow, but they're using it internally, intra-company workflow. And if you think about it, being able to navigate your own organization can be as hard as navigating all of your third parties. Why should you know about who's available in one of your other teams in India or in Australia or in Asia, just as easy as your counterparty? Problem remains. But the difference is that the management information that Taskize gives you needs to be a much more granular level, because you're actually looking to use Taskize, or the client is looking to use Taskize to optimize the way that it manages its internal workforce. And that is another example of a workflow that organizations are talking to us about. And again, we're really excited to see where this goes.
So as we sort of look to that point, inevitably when we shoot part 5 of this series,
hopefully we'll be face to face when we
in a year's time, back in studio, there's going to be a really interesting sort of development of a business that's sort of growing in all sorts of ways, shapes, and sizes, driven by customers. So for you as a sort of business leader, running that sort of vision and seeing something that's sort of morphed as much as it has over that sort of thing, driven by the customer, how does that help you sort of look forward, and what should we expect to be hearing in a year's time from you and the business?
Well, assuming regulations don't get put on hold for a year, like CSDR was, then I think we've got a very clear profile of what the next 12 months are going to look like. First of all, UMR in September, so managing margin disputes on Taskize. Second of all, settlement efficiency and penalty processing, and plus or minus buy-ins for CSDR in February. We're going to see some unusual or more customizable workflows appearing on Taskize, so clients will be able to customize their own workflows on Taskize. Hopefully we'll see a broader uptake of the outsourcing model. So we support the concepts of power of attorney and on behalf of inside of Taskize. So as an outsourcer and as somebody looking to outsource, it gives you a lot of flexibility. So we expect to see that. And then I think the last one is going to be our partnerships and our integrations. So alongside our partnership with Symphony, we've spoken to Microsoft, and we're going to be building out an integration with Microsoft Teams. Lots of the organizations that we speak to are asking for the integration with Microsoft Teams. So that seems to be inevitable as well. So it's going to be a very exciting year, and hopefully we'll be back next year to tell you all about it.
I have very little doubt. And it's been I've said it last year. I remember specifically talking about how much I've enjoyed actually seeing this evolution of this business over the last 3-4 years or so. It's been really interesting to see and almost to document, and I think it'll be quite interesting to go back to some of those initial sort of stories and see how this has sort of developed for you.
Yeah.
And that sort of people vote with their feet, and they vote with the adoption of certain technologies. And I'm sort of pleased it gives the validity to the listing of the financial technologists to see that this has been a continuous evolution of a business that's just gone from strength to strength to strength. And
it's an important point, that is, Toby. And evolution is a really important point. So if you actually look back at what we were envisaging 4 or 5 years ago and where we are now, they are very closely aligned. So the market understands what it is that Taskize does. And I think I said it last year, I'll say it again. It's really important to do one thing and to do one thing well. And you shouldn't underestimate the complexities behind intercompany workflow.
Yeah.
I describe workflow as the grease that keeps the cogs of operations moving smoothly. It's invisible, people don't understand it, but when they don't have it, they realize the pain. And Taskize brings that workflow to financial services.
Well, there's another tick in the box of the golden threads. Those businesses that are absolutely ticking the boxes of problems that need to be fixed. And you're quite right. That can either be sort of glaring issues that people are having demonstrable issues with, or when you haven't got that right, how much it sort of slows the engine down and gets the rust settling into it. And I think you guys have done an extraordinary job over the last few years. It's always a great pleasure having you on, and thank you so much for coming back on again. Likewise. Phil, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks very much.
Bye.